Welcome, age of vintage society. Jane Russell may be best known for being the brunette in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Even against those odds, she became one of the most desirable women in Hollywood, known for her sultry appeal and curvaceous figure, but behind the scenes, Jane Russell knew tragedy and heartbreak far too well. Why Jane Russell never got a chance to show off her acting chops. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Fixated by her pneumatic figure, Hollywood sold her as a smouldering sexpot. But there was so much more to Jane Russell than that. If ever a woman was at risk of being reduced to her body parts, it was that star of the 1940s and 1950s, Jane Russell, who was initially subject to a level of objectification as relentless as it was breathtaking. Jane Russell was known for playing sultry female fatale types on screen, but behind the scenes she could be a goody two-shoes. She was a staunch Republican and devout Christian. That's not an exaggeration. Russell actually organised a weekly Bible study at her home, which she named the Hollywood Christian Group. Jane Russell got her first acting job when Howard Hughes cast the unknown in The Outlaw. Even before the picture was released, publicity stills that highlighted her buxom attributes had made her a star. Many of Russell's movies were westerns or musicals, or both. Most notably Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, in which she shared the screen with Marilyn Monroe. When her film career, which had its fair share of unsuccessful and unimaginative vehicles, slowed down, Russell continued to perform on stage and in nightclubs. She also became a spokesperson for Playtex's 18-hour bra in the 1970s. Ernest Jane Geraldine Russell was born on June 21, 1921, in Bemidji, Minnesota. Her father was a United States Army lieutenant, and her mother had been a student of drama and an actress with a travelling troupe. Once Mr. Russell was mustered out of the service, the family took up residence in Canada, but moved to California when he found employment there. The family was well-to-do, and although Jane was the only girl among 4 brothers, her mother saw to it that she took piano lessons. In addition to music, Jane was interested in drama, much as her mother had been, and participated in high school stage productions. Upon graduation, Jane took a job as a receptionist for a doctor who specialised in foot disorders. Although she had originally planned on being a designer, her father died, and she had to go to work to help the family. Jane modelled on the side and was very much sought after, especially because of her figure. She managed to save enough money to go to drama school, with the urging of her mother. Throughout her life, Russell hated what she saw as feminine fussiness. She felt that women should be treated the same as men, no special privileges, yet insisted that she was in no way a feminist. A man should be the head of the household, and a woman should be the heart. Russell's career began in a way that seems like a classic old Hollywood cliché. She broke into the film industry in her late teens. An apocryphal Hollywood story had her discovered by eccentric millionaire Howard Hughes while working as a dentist's receptionist, but the reality was slightly less boom-bang. Accompanying a friend to a photographer's studio in 1940, she was spotted by an agent who passed on pictures of her to director Howard Hawks. She was immediately cast in her first film, The Outlaw. Hughes was well known for his love of beautiful young women, so it's no surprise that he immediately focused on Jane Russell. The film was not a classic by any means, but was geared to show off Jane's ample physical assets. After appearing in tests shot by the director Howard Hawks, Russell and Jack Butel won the leading roles, co-starring with veterans Walter Houston and Thomas Mitchell, and during breaks in shooting, Russell would pose for photographs, though she later confessed that she was not fully aware of the reasons she was often requested to pose picking up pails. My boobs were bulging out over the top of my blouse every time I picked up those pails, she said. but I didn't know it until I saw myself on the covers and centrefolds of practically every magazine on the newsstands. With her sultry look and glowing sexuality, Russell became a star before she was even seen by a wide movie audience. The Hughes publicity mill ground out photos of the beauty in low-cut costumes and swimsuits, and she became famous, especially as a pin-up for World War II GIs. The experience made her savvy about the vulgarity of the film industry. Her breasts were less covered and more fetishized, lit, photographed, designed and dreamed about than any woman's in the cinema had been until that time. Hughes even designed a special bra for her to wear in the film, although she chose not to use it. On the film's much delayed nationwide release, it was denounced by the church. Surprisingly, Russell, a devout Christian since childhood, was unperturbed. While the film was tame by contemporary standards, Hollywood and state censors held up its release for almost 3 years. The issue ended up in court, with one judge saying Russell's breasts hung over the picture like a thunderstorm over a landscape. They were everywhere. Hughes insisted that he could make Russell a star, and before long she had signed a 7-year contract with him. First up was The Outlaw, a western about infamous outlaw Billy the Kid, where she played his love interest. For her debut she was paid the princely sum of $50 per week. It would be the movie that would put her on the map, but for all the wrong reasons. In 1943 The Outlaw was finally released in San Francisco, and though the Catholic Church was excommunicating anyone who saw it, it played to packed houses for 9 weeks. The censors were unimpressed, even after 37 scenes of Russell were excised, and the film was pulled quickly from its limited release. The Hollywood Production Code Administration objected to the amount of skin that was shown, particularly by Russell. Hughes, who had directed the film, had to think fast, so he came up with a devious plan. Hughes had cut some more salacious footage from the film, but the whole ordeal had scared off the film's distributor, and if it didn't get released, he'd lose millions. In order to draw attention to the film and create a demand for it, he actually called for it to be banned. He manufactured public outcry, secretly calling concerned citizens to tip them off about the vulgar film. The film was banned by the Hays office due to the amount of cleavage displayed by Russell, particularly in a scene in which she nurses the sick and cold Billy, and it is hinted that she raises his temperature by getting into his bed. The camera was opposite me, and you could see way too much cleavage. The photographer Greg Toland had told Hughes he had better do the scene from another angle, and he did, but he was trying to get the first angle past, and that is exactly the reason that The Outlaw was held up for so many years. He was stubborn, she said, and knew damn well that people would die to see something they were told they couldn't. Somehow Howard's ploy worked. The attention that it drew to the film created a demand, but the story didn't end there. Upon its release, the production code once again pulled it. It was such a grueling process. Russell later said that she felt as if she spent the first half of the 1940s doing nothing but promoting her debut film. The controversy over The Outlaw had made a star of Russell, and its success just cemented her place in Hollywood. That didn't mean Russell had it made, though. Her next movie, the 1946 drama Young Widow, was a failure, but it would take more than that to keep Jane Russell down. Russell proved to be a competent actress in both steamy thrillers, notably 2 pairings with Robert Mitchum, and as a comedy foil for Bob Hope. Her best remembered film is Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, in which she teamed memorably with Marilyn Monroe as 2 little girls from Little Rock out to catch rich husbands. Censors remained wary of her, and in the UK half of her major solo in the film, Ain't There Anyone Here for Love, featuring Russell cavorting poolside with a bunch of muscle men, was cut from the movie. In stark contrast to her prevailing image, Russell was a devoted churchgoer, and in later years she toured as part of a gospel group. But Jane Russell was no fool, and she knew that Hughes and the rest of Hollywood were trading in on her curvaceous figure, but she also had her limits and wasn't shy about speaking up when things went too far. She said, Sex appeal is good, but not in bad taste. Then it's ugly. I don't think a star has any business posing in a vulgar way. Russell had spent years in Hollywood purgatory waiting for The Outlaw to be released, and over time the endless delays took a major toll on her career. Finally, in 1948, Russell began to make something of a comeback when she was cast as Calamity Jane in The Paleface. Thankfully, the flick was a massive hit for Paramount that year, but for Russell the best was yet to come. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes was just around the corner and cemented Russell's status as Hollywood royalty. In fact, Russell even got paid more than her co-star Marilyn Monroe. But despite this competition, Monroe spoke fondly of Russell in the final interview she gave before her tragic passing, saying that Russell was quite wonderful to me. The success of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes wasn't the only triumph for Russell that year. After her disastrous and lengthy contract with Howard Hughes through RKO Pictures, Russell was finally able to strike out on her own. Under personal contract to Hughes, Russell had an active social life in Hollywood, dating both the football star Robert Waterfield, who had been a teenage sweetheart, and the actor John Payne, and in 1942 she had an abortion. In those days, no nice girl got pregnant. There was no such thing as keeping a child out of wedlock. Her adopted Irish son that nearly ended her career. As the result of an illegal abortion, she was unable to have children. She and Robert Waterfield adopted an Irish boy, Thomas. She became a campaigner for adoption, lobbying for the rights of Americans to adopt children from overseas. They later adopted another son, Robert, and a daughter, Tracy. Later, while in London, she was contacted by a woman who was originally from Ireland, but had been living in London with her husband and their young family. In 1954, she and Waterfield set up an independent production company, Russ Field. She read scripts, worked hard, and her subsequent films were intelligent. The Tall Men with Clark Gable was one of the best of her 9 westerns, and in The Proto-Feminist, The Revolt of Mamie Stover, she played a prostitute fighting her way. Although Russell largely retired from Hollywood after her final film, 1970's Darker Than Amber, she had remained active in her church, with charitable organisations and with a local singing group until her health began to decline. The type of films that Hughes cast Russell in focused only on her body, and she never really got a chance to show off her acting chops in those years. While many of the films were financial successes, they're not exactly the type of stuff that critics still talk about today. As a result, many critics and fans have said that her talent was wasted during those years. Russell died in 2011 at age 89 from a respiratory-related illness. She died at her home in Santa Maria. She always said, "I'm going to die in the saddle. I'm not going to sit at home and become an old woman." And that's exactly what she did. She died in the saddle. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the life and legacy of Jane Russell? It is so sad that she never really got the chance to show her talent.